So the question of the day is very simple. Is private jet travel safe? That's what we're going to answer in today's episode. We're going to look at the industry and, I'm from the inside. I'm going to tell you the truth of what's actually happening out there and show you, what you need to be doing if you are going to charter a private jet or use private jets to travel. My name is Fabrizio. I'm the founder here of BizJet TV. I'm also an airline transport pilot. I've flown for the airlines and also private jets. I've been involved in management of aircraft and that, marketing and a number of other things that I've done in the pilot world, including training pilots. And I'm also the author of the book, The Quantum Economy. Lots of insights in here about what's happening in the private jet market. So let's talk about the stats. Okay, so I mentioned in my book, The Quantum Economy, that private jet travel is actually 9.2 times less safer than airline travel. This is a fact. So you're paying 15 times more to fly private, and you've got 10 times more risk of crashing and dying. So the question is, why is this happening? And where is the trend going? And are there any private jet operations out there that are actually safe? So, first of all, what's happening right now? We've got a lot of pilots retiring. We've said this before here on BizJet TV because of COVID. And we already knew this was going to happen because the baby boomers kind of dictate the market. So there's more people in the baby boomer generation than the newer generation. So we already knew by just looking at demographics, COVID or non-COVID, we knew that, we're going to have an issue because number one, people are traveling more. So we need more airplanes. So if we need more airplanes, we need more pilots. But then we've got the bulk of pilots, the guys that are 65, they're retiring and there aren't enough younger people coming in. Then we had COVID hit where a lot of guys took early retirement. And they're not coming back. So there's that aspect. But we've also seen just in April this year, there's been an increase of 14% of people getting their airline transport pilot's license. Now, to fly for a charter company, you can just fly on a commercial pilot certificate. If you want to join an airline, you have to have an airline transport pilot certificate. And so a lot of guys now are saying, well, the airlines are calling. They pay more money. They give a better deal. You've got a roster, when you're flying, when you're not flying, you get lots of benefits, which very often you don't get with the charter companies, and you get a really, really good retirement fund. So when you do retire, you're retiring on 80% of your salary, and there's a bit more stability also in the airline world. And so a lot of guys are just leaving the charter companies and they're going to fly for the airlines. So the airlines, they're still not picking up as many people as they need. In fact, in the US now, they're also hiring pilots from abroad. So you can actually get a visa if you're a European or, wherever you're from to go and work in the US as a pilot. And then as long as you've got FAA certificates, you can, knock on the door of the big airlines out there and even the smaller ones. And they'll be quite happy to hire you. Someone with experience, why not? So this is what's happening. But the companies that are suffering are actually the private jet charter companies because these are the ones that pay less. As a captain, you're making about 120 to 160 a year when you can make a lot more with the airlines. Or you can make a lot more as a corporate pilot. Now, what's the difference between a charter pilot and a corporate pilot? The corporate pilot works for a private individual. And I've done both. I've worked for air taxi company or charter company as it's called. And I've also worked as a corporate pilot. And I worked for a couple of guys in Italy at the time, and they bought the jet together, and they had separate companies, and I flew for them for 3 years, and then I went on to fly for a fashion designer, and we flew him and his people, but we also chartered the plane out when he wasn't using it. So we'd fly maybe 30, 40 hours a month, 10 would be with the owner, and the other hours would be charter. And that's what we did there. So, different people use different systems, but the main thing is here, why is private jet travel, why are the statistics so against private jet travel? Why is it so risky? And this is the thing. A lot of people, they approach private jet travel like when they book an airline flight and they're looking for the cheapest option. I'd be very, very careful at doing that. And now we've got all this technology with these apps where you can go on this app, buy an empty leg, do this, do that, or go with these large charter brokers where they've got a load of young people working for them that have absolutely no experience in aviation. They bring them in, they train them up for a few months, and then off they go. And no vetting is done on exactly, how this private jet charter company, how they select their pilots, how they train them, how they do their maintenance, because there's lots of stuff behind the scenes where they're cutting corners in order to stay afloat. Now, the charter company doesn't really make much money on charters. They make money on the maintenance of the aircraft, and they make money when the aircraft is bought or sold. So what they do is someone like me comes along, decides to set up their own charter company. I meet 2 or 3 rich guys that got some jets. I end up getting 3 or 4 jets under management, and I charter them out when they're not using them. I'll make a little bit of money. They'll make a little bit of money. But the airplanes, it's my interest to make the airplane fly as much as possible. Because what happens? If it flies more, I make more money. If it flies more, it breaks down more often, and I make money on the maintenance. I make 30% on the spare parts. I make money on the labor. And then you get to a certain point where the airplane's flown X amount of hours, and you start talking to the owner about selling the airplane and buying something else. But, if we're going to sell the airplane, what I want to do is try and sell it to somebody that's going to keep it with me under management. So instead of, taking this plane out and putting another one in, I'm keeping this airplane in. The owner's just changing. I'm adding another airplane to the fleet. So this is kind of what goes on behind the scenes. So all this does not play in favor of the owner. And I've got a situation right now where I'm talking to this owner we introduced last year. He has a couple of jets. His right-hand man reached out to me about selling the airplanes, but they've given the exclusivity to the management company. So he said, if you can help this guy sell the airplanes. So I said, well, I actually have a buyer in the US for one of your planes. It's a Citation XLS Plus, really nice airplane. And I spoke to the management company, and they turned around and said, oh, no, we don't want to sell it to somebody in the US. We want to sell it to somebody in Europe. So Fabrizio, if you can help us find someone in Europe that will keep it with us and allow us to fly 300 hours charter, that's the perfect match. And I'm like, yeah, but wait a minute. I've got a buyer in the US. They're ready now. They've already got money in escrow. They're ready to buy. This was 2 months ago. I was talking to the owner's representative, his right-hand man rang me up the other day, and he said, I said, well, you need to send me more information on the aircraft. And, and by the way, that guy is trying to get a deal in Europe, which is why it's not sold yet. I've got 1 or 2, even 3 buyers in the US right now that will buy your airplane. This would have been sold 2 months ago if you'd let me get on with it. But, in the end, they won't let me get on with it, which is fine. This guy, the owner, is kind of all over the place. 1 minute he wants me to help him, another minute he doesn't. Then another minute he's asking somebody else, and he's just all over the place. And you get people like that sometimes. But at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to lose out. Already, when he bought these 2 airplanes, and the management company that's working with him at the moment are the ones that actually told him to buy these 2 planes. When I sat down and spoke to him last year, I said, well, actually, these 2 planes is not what you should be flying. You should have been flying 1 airplane, and this particular airplane would have done all the jobs of the 2, but it would have cost you a lot less than having 2 airplanes. Oh. And that's what kind of encouraged him to sell the aircraft. So he's already had bad advice from these people, but he's still sticking with them for some reason, which is fine. It's his money. So this is what you have to understand. This is what kind of goes on behind the scenes. The other thing is pilot training. What these charter companies do, and they're trying to make the owner make a little bit of money on what they're doing. So they're trying to go on the cheap with everything. And the pilot training they're training for the bare minimum. And this is where the danger comes, because the FAA and EASA and the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK, they have certain standards, and every year the pilots have to train to these standards and perform a certain number of maneuvers to certain standards. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening. For example, a lot of the training is based on flying with 1 engine. So can you have an engine failure at decision speed? Can you actually take off? Can you control the airplane if the engine fails at that moment? Can you come round and land on 1 engine? Can you come round and do a go around with 1 engine? So it's all flying a 2-engine airplane on 1 engine, which is fine. If we go and look at the accidents, there are very few accidents that happen because of an engine failure. A lot of accidents happen for other things. Controlled flight into terrain, airplanes going into upset recovery situations, planes not being de-iced, all this kind of thing, or planes coming in high and fast and landing long and ending up on the end of the runway. These are the reasons why planes are crashing, and these are things that need to be addressed during training. If you're going into tricky airports like Aspen, for example, you should be doing a training scenario in the simulator designed for your particular airplane for that particular airport, and then perform all the different potential emergency things that can happen on that airfield in really bad weather conditions. So that way the pilot is learning what could potentially happen at Aspen with that particular airplane. So the pilot is prepared. But this is not happening in most cases. But the charter company's not going to do this, okay? But if you are a private individual and you want to buy an airplane, which is, a good way to go, you want to give your pilots more training than the minimum requirement. But let's face it, if you buy a sports team with the goal of winning the NBA, for example, you want to buy good players, but you also want to make sure that these players are trained in a way that when they get on the pitch, they're going to peak perform and win. Well, it's the same with pilots. You want to make sure they're getting, you hire the right people first, and you give them that extra training. And if it means spending an extra 50 grand a year per pilot, do it. Do it. Now, will you see the difference? No, because a friend of mine that's in the security business was talking to a client last year, and he said to me, Bob, I don't understand why I pay you because nothing ever happens. And he turns around and he said, the reason why nothing happens is because you hired me and you pay me well. So it's a preventative game. So it's the same with pilot training. Things, and now and again things do go wrong, but your pilots are well trained. They will bring you down safely. And this is really important. Safety is a big issue right now. Now, of course, with the pilot shortage, we're going to have another problem. There are some flight schools which are advertising, become a pilot in 5 months. So you jump in, do all your training in 5 months, and now you're a commercial pilot. Or we've got entrepreneurs jumping in the game right now and saying, well, you know what? I'm going to learn to fly, buy my own plane and fly it. And there they are in 5 months' time, they're flying their own Honda jet or their own Cirrus jet or their own Citation jet. But, the human brain can't assimilate all this new information in 5 months. You need a certain amount of time to digest the information to make it second nature. This is really, really important. So take your time in your training. I mean, I got my private pilot's license when I was 17. I did the course in 5 weeks, and then I just flew. 17, and then I was 22 when I took my exam to become a commercial pilot, my instrument rating. So during those 5 years, I built my hours up. When I took my exam, I think I had 320 hours, not 250, 320. So I had a few more hours under my belt. I'd done aerobatics. I'd done a number of things, but I gave myself time to let the information sink in. And this is really, really important. So you can't just say, I'm going to buy a jet and off you go. It takes time to assimilate the information. And this is important in order to be safe. And then once you have got the qualifications, you have to stay safe by continuously training. And this, unfortunately, is not happening, has not happened in the private jet charter world. And it's going to get worse because people aren't addressing the problem. And now we've got the private jet charter guys either going and flying a corporate job for $400,000 a year. And there's some friends of mine that have gone and done that. You don't fly much. You get in with a good owner. You fly 200 hours a year. You make 400 grand. He's someone that plans his time. He gives you enough days off and that. You get more vacation time than you would with the airlines. And some people like that. Okay. And you'll get some good pilots. You may even get some guys retired from the airlines that are happy to do that. But then you've got, the charter guys. They're the ones that are not making as much money. So when you pick the phone up to ring the charter company, very often, you're getting the cheaper pilots. So, and they have to keep things that way because they need to tick along. So this is one of the problems that's surfacing there. But, there are a bunch of charter companies out there, and I offer my charter services. What I do is there's a number of companies on my list which I trust. I know how they do things. So if you call me for a charter, I can set you up with something that's going to be safe. Now, it's not going to be cheap, okay? Because at the end of the day, some of these companies do more training, and there are a few out there that are doing it right, okay? Most of them aren't, but there are a few that are doing it right. Otherwise, why not lease a plane? If you lease the plane, then we can, control the pilot. We can select the pilots and, send them to do adequate training in that. Or even if you buy an airplane, and this is something that I do for all my clients. I'm on the buying end. I buy airplanes for people, but I understand that at the end of the day, it's not just about buying the plane. And I always tell people, don't get too bogged down on the plane because the pilots are far more important than the plane. So we need to look at that aspect as well. I'm not saying let's hire the pilots first and then get the plane. But, this is the type of mindset you need to have because some guys come to me, we go out, we buy a $20 million Gulfstream and then they want to pay the pilot $120,000 a year. And I say, look, if you're going to pay the guy $120 a year, you're not going to get a good guy. Oh, no, but this, that, and they have their own ideas about the industry. I said, look, if you're hiring me, you need to listen. Otherwise, I'm not your guy. Go and do business with somebody else. This is the way I work, and this is why I work the way I work. And this is really, really important to understand because safety is the first thing that was drummed into me when I learned to fly. It's all about safety. Safety is the most important thing. And in order to be safe, you need to be rested, you need to be fit, you need to be well trained, you need to be up to date, you need to be continuously training and continuously improving yourself. These are the kind of pilots that you want, but you also need to put your pilots in an environment where they can continue to do this. And that costs money. Private jet travel is not cheap, and it's never going to be cheap. And these people coming up with these low-cost models for private jet travel, that's a massive scam. Run a mile if anybody talks to you about that. That's really, really important to understand. So that's it from me here on BizJet TV. So I want to hear your comments. Let's get the conversation going. What do you think? What's been your experience with private jet travel? And don't get me wrong, there are some outfits out there that are doing a really, really good job. A couple of you commented on a video a few weeks ago about that. And there are some out there, and I'm happy to get on a call and talk to you a bit more, because there's only so much information I can disclose here. If you buy a copy of my book, The Quantum Economy, and you post a review on Amazon and email me that you've done that, I will get on a call with you for about an hour, just over an hour, for free, and we'll look at your situation and see what the best strategy is for you private jet travel wise. And check out this other video we did recently about high stakes drama on a private jet, where we can analyze the stats on the recent accidents and whatever, and I go more into detail on what's happening and what needs to be done. I'm sure you'll find that one really, really interesting. And remember to subscribe to BizJet TV. And that's all from me on this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.